So originally I recorded this back when Mecha Break really did become 1 week old, but a whole bunch of production woes and real life crap got in the way, so now I'm re-recording this 2 weeks later. However, my thoughts have not changed since then. Is Mecha Break still fun to play 1 week later or even 2 weeks later? So far the answer is an absolute resounding yes. This game is just as fun and addicting as it was back when I played the open beta. And that is so important because the value of these live service games is more determined in the long term. Most people play single player games for about 20 hours, 30 plus hours if it's something that has a lot of teeth to it, like an open world or an RPG, but generally most games are designed to only last for about a week worth of casual playthrough. However, a live service game does not have that luxury. It needs to be able to retain its player base, not just for 20 hours, not just even for a week, but months and even years at a time. And that is when the value of the gameplay loop is going to be really tested. So I thought it'd be worthwhile to start a new series called The State of Break, in which I go over my personal experience with the game over a long period of time, as well as just chronicle the goings-ons within the community. What people are saying and the buzz around the current state of the game and all that. So to start this off, I want to quickly go over my time with the game back in the open beta in February. I honestly just picked this game up on a whim. I heard about it, I think on the Game Awards that year, and I'm like, I like Mecha, so I'm just going to give this a try, because just throwing giant robots in there and you immediately get my attention regardless of what it is. Now whether it can hold my attention is going to be a whole nother thing, because I bounced off of plenty of Mecha shows, Mecha games and all that. This was not one of them. I was not prepared for how addicting this game was going to sink its hooks into me. Oh my god. This game plays like an absolute dream. I cannot go back to Armored Core 6, and that was my favorite Mecha game up to that point, and now it's so hard to go back to it because Mecha Break just plays so much better. This game is basically Armored Core if it had even more fluid gameplay, even better melee combat, more responsive controls. Just every single striker in this game makes you feel like the protagonist of a different Mecha series. You want to feel like you're piloting your own Valkyrie from Macross, you got the Falcon or the Sky Raider. You want to feel like Optimus Prime and just exude invincible energy, or you just tear through lower level bad guys, then you got Welkin. There was like 5 different types of Gundam, from Grandpa to the Exia to the ones that use the funnels, that literally every flavor of what kind of mecha you like is in this game. Even if you prefer the big, heavier, chunky tanks style mechs, like you see in a lot of Western stuff, like in BattleTech, you got Stego and Tricera. Literally everyone is accounted for here. You will find something that you will love to play as. Even the healers are fun. Like, people can run Lumine or Panaka as DPS characters, and it works. Like, you really should be running them as healers, but the fact that you can do that successfully and not just do a meme build like people used to do with Mercy back in Overwatch days, like, this is an absolute dream come true when it comes to mecha video games. And that has always been this game's strongest suit. The only criticisms people have with the game back then and now is really stuff around the gameplay itself. Because yeah, people are always going to bitch about balance issues, but that happens in every single game. It's inevitably going to happen, and the balance is not so horribly out of tune that every striker is still viable. At some point, you just gotta actually play well and not be an idiot. But back in the open beta, the main point of tension was the fact that not all the strikers were unlocked at launch. You actually started off with Elyseness, then after you played the tutorial, which was mandatory back then, you could not skip it, you had to choose either Tricera or Falcon, and then everybody else had to be unlocked over time using, like, there were matrix points back then, but back then they functioned just like the mission tokens do now. The currency that you earned by playing the game over time, you had to unlock the strikers using that method, and for some it only took like a couple hours or no time at all, but others like the Panther, which I distinctly remember because that shit took me 5 days to unlock as opposed to the 5 hours it takes now. That was a lot of people's biggest problem. Plus the fact that the newest striker at the time, Inferno, was locked behind a battle pass, which they were also testing out at that time. It also became really evident early on that when it comes to like high level play, the tank composition was just so oppressive. If people ran like 3 tanks plus a healer, they could just steamroll everything else, and the other team would have to play a tank heavy comp in order to compete. In the full release build of Season 0, that has been addressed in the form of new strikers. Inferno being available from the get-go is a striker that really forces tanks to move out of the way. Same thing with Serenith. And Stellaris is another melee heavy striker, and melee is always going to be dangerous to tanks because they can just cut through their fluid armor. Tanks are still really valuable at the high level, but they are far diminished with the addition of these new strikers, so it's not nearly as oppressive as it used to be. But what also used to be oppressive was Mashmac mode. Back then, once you found a new weapons out in the field, you basically kept those weapons permanently, and you can add them to your weapon airdrops as often as you like. There was no cap to that. So what would happen was, once people found the beam sniper, it became a lot harder to play Mashmac because after about the first week, everybody was running with beam rifles and spamming that shit from half across the map. Back then, and during the open beta, you could only run with teams. There was no solo running, but that didn't matter because the team would get wiped out anyways. The changes they made to Mashmac makes it so much better and a much more calmer experience, which is what it was supposed to be, because Mashmac, from what I can gather, is the alternative to PvP mode, where people who don't want to have to constantly compete and like be sweating all the time or can't keep up with that kind of crowd. Mashmac was a mode for them. It was something for them to still do. Almost like a single player mode, if it wasn't for the fact that you had other players to deal with. But the fact that there was now a solo queue edges it towards more that direction. And I think that was the better idea because I love to play Mashmac when I just want to cool down after some intense matches of constantly doing PvP grinding. Beam snipers are still pretty oppressive though, but they just happen a lot less frequently than you used to because now, in the current build, when you lose your weapons while running, they are lost permanently. So people are hesitant to bring those in now because they are such high valued weapons and they don't want to lose them. However, it has become pretty clear that Aquila is the best striker for Mashmac. You combine it with its sturdiness, plus the fact that it can snipe people, and it has pretty decent mobility because it's like a semi-flyer, and its abilities which locks strikers in place. Once it sees you, it can send that drone to stun you, and then just take pot shots at you until you're dead, and you can't do anything about it. And the developers have noticed that is in fact what's happening, and they are trying to come up with a solution. Because some people are starting to bounce off of Mashmac, at least on extreme mode. I haven't seen it occur nearly as often in normal mode. Probably because extreme is where all the sweaties are congregating to because they want to get the supply boxes that drop in that mode. And speaking of supply boxes, that is the other major change that has occurred here in the final release build. Before, the main method of the game to make money back in the open beta, or the proposed plan to, was to use Chlorite as a time saver so you could unlock strikers more quickly without having to grind, or the Battle Pass, which was how you unlocked Inferno. Everybody hated that, so they had completely pivoted directions. Now they are going the CSGO route, where, well, it's a combination of CSGO and Warframe, I'd say, because Chlorite is still here as a premium currency. However, Chlorite purely is now only used to buy cosmetic items for your pilot or for stuff on the player auction house. I think that's where they really want the money to be in, because you put in money, so you can participate in the auction house, and they get a cut of every single transaction that happens. It's literally what Valve does with the player skin economy in CSGO. That's why I use that comparison. But there's also the mercenary ticket, which is basically a time saver because it doubles the amount of mission tokens you get, which makes it a lot quicker to unlock all the other stuff that requires that type of currency. So all in all, I think that's fine personally. The premium currency that you exchange for real money with only being used for cosmetics that don't affect gameplay, that's fine. Tickets that you pay for to serve as time savers to unlock stuff, that's fine, because none of the stuff that you unlock there is really game breaking, and you still have the option to unlock the most important parts, the strikers, in a relatively short amount of time, so you're not pressured to immediately use that. All the other extra stuff you unlock with mission tokens are just cargo rockets, some of the passes used to expand your hangar, which is also just purely cosmetic and more just fun. All the most important stuff, the strikers, the photo mode, Mashmac, and all the different game types, that's all free. And that's what really heightens the value of this game as a free-to-play game. There is so much to do on launch, and it's why this game is still so much fun to play even 2 weeks later. I wish I could say everybody else outside of the fan base is just as enthusiastic about this game. However, unfortunately, the game had received a very mixed response upon release on Steam. Back in the open beta, the mixed response, even negative response, was due to the fact that they got so overwhelmed with so many people that their servers actually broke and people couldn't get in for the first few hours. This time, however, this game seems to be the target of almost like malicious misinformation campaign of people who see it as free to play, see it has microtransactions, and then immediately just assume that this is another pay to win game and give it downvotes and pump just blatantly wrong information about how the game's monetization system works. There's a community push to try and get more people to leave positive reviews to combat against this. And the whole reason why I started to make YouTube videos about Mecha Break is part of that effort to combat the misinformation and to help new players get on board with this amazing title. At the very least, the player numbers are still pretty healthy, all things considered. Yeah, the player base has dropped considerably since the launch of the game, but that's par for the course for any single live service game. Like after the initial hype, people's curiosity is filled, only the diehards stick around. Or at the very least, people are still fans, but they just don't have the time to engage with it as frequently as they used to. Now they have to return to their real life obligations. That's what happened to me. I played this game using every second of spare time I had in that first week. Second week, I had to tone down my game time significantly because I had to return to my other responsibilities, the other projects I wanted to work on, including these videos. So now I only play for a few hours a day, if at all, with most of my playtime being the weekend. And player numbers are pretty healthy during the weekend, and that's what really matters the most. No word as to how popular this is in China right now, because I think most people are using the game's proprietary launcher to play the game, so Steam isn't recording those numbers. So for all we know, the player base is even larger in its homeland of China than it is in Europe and America. You know how gamers are though, they see dipping numbers, and because they've been conditioned to thinking that if a game's not making Marvel Rivals or Fortnite numbers of players, then it must obviously be dead or dying, and that's just not true. That's not how any even moderately successful live service works. All you really need is a small but passionate player base to keep things afloat. That's what happened with Warframe, which, may I remind people, also had a very rocky launch and was not critically well received, but it was such a unique gameplay experience that could not be offered anywhere else, that it did have a small pack of diehard fans that stuck with it until it got better and was able to draw in a much larger player base. For Honor is also another game that had a very rocky start, and people basically stopped talking about it a year later, but because it is such a unique game that nobody else has done in the 10 years it's been out, including other melee combat games like Chivalry and Mordhau, which are a completely different approach to melee combat. People are still playing that game to this day. It's still been getting updates by Ubisoft, and it still has pretty relatively healthy numbers for a game that old and for such a specific niche. Because of that, I am confident that Mecha Break is going to succeed in the long run, because there are no other mecha games out right now that are hero shooters, that are live service, and play as elegantly and as deliciously, for lack of a better word, as this game does. There's no other game that plays like Mecha Break, and because of that, I think it's going to hold on to its player base long enough for it to get all the kinks it has right now out. And I suspect that they're going to withhold their big marketing push until the PS release. That is going to be the true marker of how much of an audience it can pull. Regardless of how big it is, I think this game's going to be just fine, and I'm looking forward to chronicling this game's story from start to end. And I hope you guys will join me along that journey. I'm going to be doing another one of these at the end of the month, where I talk about the game 1 month later, and then again at the end of the season, and then afterwards it's just going to be an end of season sort of video. We're just going to see in real time how much legs this game really has. In the interim, I'm going to be making all kinds of other videos. This game has really helped me get back into being creative, into video making, which I've been dragging on for so long. I really wanted to get back into making YouTube videos on a regular basis, and this game has really rekindled that fire in me. So there's even more stuff, including more updates on the games that I'm currently working on. So yeah, be sure to stick around. You know what buttons to press to do all that, so yeah.